Welcome back to the deep dive. I want to start today with a question that feels maybe a little uncomfortable to ask, but I think everyone listening has felt it at some point.
Oh, for sure. It's that feeling in the air right now.
Right. When you look at the world right now, the sudden wars, the financial crashes that just seem to happen every 10 years, like clockwork, the way media narratives pivot overnight, do you see chaos? Do you see just a bunch of random accidents and, incompetent leaders bumping into each other? Or do you see an operating system?
That really is the fundamental question, because we are completely conditioned to view history as just, well, one damn thing after another.
Just a series of accidents.
Exactly, just accidents. But the source we're covering today argues that if you actually rip up the floorboards and look at the wiring, none of this is random. It's actually the predictable output of a specific machine.
Yeah, and we are diving into The Hidden Hand, Then and Now, Pattern Language of Modern Power by Steafon. And I have to be honest with you, right out of the gate, when I first saw that title, my tinfoil hat alarm bells absolutely went off.
I don't blame you.
Right. The Hidden Hand. It sounds super spooky. It sounds like we're about to talk about lizard people or some secret society meeting inside a volcano.
I had the exact same reaction. It sounds incredibly conspiratorial. But Perry actually anticipates that exact skepticism. He spends the entire introduction explicitly clearing the air.
Which is so necessary for a topic like this.
It really is. He says, look, this is emphatically not a conspiracy theory book in the way pop culture uses that term. There are no shadowy villains twisting their mustaches just for the sake of being evil.
And he explicitly rejects any sort of ethnic scapegoating, right?
Yes, completely. He is talking about something much more boring, but honestly much more dangerous, which is structural analysis.
Right, and that's a term we really need to nail down before we go any further.
Yeah.
Because usually when people talk about power, they talk about personalities.
Always.
It's always Trump, Biden, Putin, Musk.
Yeah.
But Perry says that's just a distraction. So what exactly does he mean by structural analysis?
Think of it like a bridge. If a bridge collapses, you don't blame the concrete for being evil.
You don't say the steel hated the commuters.
Right, exactly. You look at the blueprints, you look at the load-bearing walls and the stress limits. So Perry is basically applying that engineering mindset to power itself.
Okay, I like that framing.
He argues that if you build a system designed to concentrate wealth, it will concentrate wealth, regardless of who is structurally sitting in the president's chair. He's looking at the blueprints, the incentives, the institutions, and the documented programs.
And to keep us honest and to keep us away from that tinfoil territory we mentioned,
Yeah.
he uses the Standards of Evidence Rubric, which I found really, really helpful.
Oh, it's essential for this kind of topic. He breaks evidence down into tiers.
Right, so break that down for us.
So tier 1 is the absolute gold standard. Primary documents. We're talking declassified government records, congressional testimony, signed executive orders.
The actual receipts?
The literal receipts. And then tier 2 is official investigations and peer-reviewed academic research. And Perry makes a point, and we are going to try to stick to this too today, to say almost exclusively in those two tiers, we aren't guessing.
So the mission today for you listening is structural literacy. We want to stop asking who is doing this to us and start asking what mechanism produced this outcome.
Beautifully put.
And naturally, to understand the mechanism, you have to follow the money.
Always. And specifically, the architecture of money. Because Perry argues that the modern world was essentially born in 1815 at the Battle of Waterloo.
Okay, I have heard versions of the Nathan Mayer Rothschild story before, but break down the structural lesson here. Why does a battle in 1815 matter to my bank account today?
So picture the scene. The fate of Europe hangs in the balance. It's Napoleon versus Wellington. The British financial markets are in a total panic because rumors are flying that Napoleon won.
And if Napoleon wins, the British Empire is basically done.
Right, the bonds, the debt of the empire are worthless. So everyone is selling. It's the complete fire sale in the streets of London.
But Rothschild has a better network.
He does. He has this private courier network that is actually faster than the British government's own messengers. So he knows Wellington actually won.
Wow.
And here is the genius and, frankly, the ruthlessness of it. He doesn't tell anyone. He goes into the market and starts buying.
Buying up the panic.
Exactly.
Right, yeah.
He buys up British debt for pennies on the dollar because everyone else is terrified. And then when the official news finally arrives, the bonds skyrocket. He essentially owns the market.
He made a fortune. The book says it was something like 20 million pounds in 1815 money, which is astronomical.
Mm-hmm.
But why is this the birth of the modern world? Just because one banker got insanely rich?
Because it established a hierarchy that we literally still live under today.
Right.
Information asymmetry plus capital equals control. It proved that private banking networks could operate faster and more efficiently than sovereign governments. From that moment on, governments had to come to the private banks to fund their wars and their debts. It shifted the ultimate balance of power from the sovereign, the king, or the president to the financier.
Which eventually leads us to the United States and a very secret meeting on Jekyll Island in 1910. And I got to say, this story always sounds like fiction to me.
It totally does, but it is deeply historically documented. You have Senator Nelson Aldrich and representatives from the Morgan and Rockefeller empires, literally the absolute titans of Wall Street, boarding a private train car in New Jersey.
Under false names, right?
Yes, they used code names. They were actually told not to acknowledge each other if they happened to cross paths in the dining car.
That is wild.
And they traveled to this secluded hunting club off the coast of Georgia to write the legislation that ultimately became the Federal Reserve Act.
And Frank Vanderlip, who was actually there, later admitted in the Saturday Evening Post that they were, quote, furtive as conspirators. But here's my question. If they were just writing a banking law to stabilize the economy, why hide? Why all the cloak and dagger?
Because of the optics. Perry points out that if the American public knew that Wall Street bankers were essentially writing the regulations for Wall Street banks, it never would have passed.
Yeah, people would have rioted.
They had to make it look like a government agency. But structurally, the Federal Reserve is a really unique beast. It is privately owned, it serves private financial interests, yet it controls public policy.
And that's the part that hits the listener right in the wallet. They control interest rates, the money supply, essentially the cost of living for everyone.
Exactly. And the book argues that this specific structure inevitably leads to boom and bust cycles. We grow up thinking the Great Depression was like a hurricane.
Just a natural disaster that hit the economy out of nowhere.
Right, that's the passive view. Oh, the market just crashed. But structural analysis says otherwise. The book cites Milton Friedman, the Nobel Prize winner. He argued that the Fed deliberately contracted the money supply just as the economy was wobbling, which turned a normal recession into a total catastrophe.
And there's a smoking gun for this, right? A Tier 2 admission from a very high level.
There is. In 2002, at a dinner honoring Friedman, Ben Bernanke, who was then a Fed governor and later became the chairman, said publicly, and I quote, "Regarding the Great Depression, you're right, we did it. We're very sorry, but thanks to you, we won't do it again."
We did it. That is just stark.
It is. It reveals that the central bank literally has the power to crash the economy, whether through incompetence or intent. And when you zoom out even further, you see the Bank for International Settlements, the BIS in Switzerland, coordinating all these central banks.
And the book mentions they have diplomatic immunity, right?
Complete diplomatic immunity. No police can enter their grounds. They're entirely outside the democratic process.
Okay, so we have the financial architecture. That's the engine. But if you own the bank, you need to make sure that customers don't realize the game is rigged. You have to control the narrative. Which brings us to manufacturing reality.
Right. Because you cannot sustain a system that benefits the few at the expense of the many without a very, very sophisticated propaganda apparatus. Perry traces this back to the Spanish-American War in 1898. The USS Maine explodes in Havana Harbor.
Remember the Maine, to hell with Spain. That was the big headline.
Exactly. Hearst and Pulitzer, the biggest media moguls of the day, blamed Spanish sabotage immediately. They whipped the American public into a total frenzy.
But the evidence wasn't even there yet.
No, later investigations showed it was almost certainly just an accidental coal bunker explosion. But the structural point is, the media owners wanted a war to sell papers and expand U.S. influence, so they literally manufactured a reality that made war inevitable.
That was print media. But the book gets really dark when it moves to the Cold War and the CIA. We have to talk about Operation Mockingbird.
Yes. This is Tier 1, fully confirmed by the Church Committee Senate hearings in 1975. The CIA had secret relationships with over 400 American journalists.
400? That's massive.
And they weren't just gathering intel, they were placing stories. A high-ranking CIA official named Frank Wisner actually boasted that he could play the American media like a, quote, mighty Wurlitzer.
That image is so vivid, just pressing keys on an organ and watching the public dance to whatever tune you want. But I do want to push back on this a little bit. That was the 70s. Today, the book argues, they don't even need the CIA to call reporters right. It's much more subtle now.
It's way more efficient now. This is where Perry brings in Chomsky and Herman's propaganda model. You don't need a smoky back room anymore. You just need filters.
Like ownership in advertising.
Right. If a news outlet relies on pharmaceutical advertising for 70% of its revenue, do you think the editors need a secret government memo to tell them not to investigate big pharma?
Of course not. They'd lose their funding.
Exactly. It's self-censorship. The structure filters out anyone who would ask the wrong questions before they even get on air.
The book also dives into the language itself. This part about neuro-linguistic programming, or NLP, felt a little like we were stepping into sci-fi territory, but the examples were really hard to argue with.
NLP is basically the science of persuasion. Perry highlights a technique called nominalization. This is when you take a dynamic process and turn it into a static noun to freeze people's thinking.
Give me a concrete example of that.
The war on terror. Terror is a tactic. It's an action, something people do. You can't have a war on a tactic any more than you can have a war on flanking.
Right.
But by turning it into a noun, terror, it becomes this permanent, nebulous enemy. It creates a state of war that structurally can never end because you can never sign a peace treaty with a noun.
Wow. And then there's the term conspiracy theory itself. I was actually shocked to learn this has a very specific birthday.
Oh yeah. CIA Dispatch 1035960. Issued in 1967. This is a Tier 1 primary document. The CIA was panicking because people were questioning the Warren report on JFK's assassination.
So what did the dispatch actually say?
It explicitly instructed their assets in the media to use the exact term conspiracy theory to discredit the critics.
So it was literally a weaponized label from the start.
It's what psychologists call a thought-terminating cliché. Once you slap that label on an argument, most people just switch off their critical thinking. They giggle, they roll their eyes, and they move on. It is an incredibly effective structural defense mechanism for power.
Okay, so we've got the money. We've got the media protecting the money. Now we have to talk about what happens when the bubble bursts. Okay. The mechanics of crisis and war.
The core concept here is the manufactured crisis. The book argues that crises are essentially just opportunities for massive wealth transfer. A crisis requires concentrated control of a resource and a regulatory environment that permits rampant speculation.
Like the Paris grain shortage in 1847, where speculators just held the supply.
Exactly. Or look at a modern example, the 2008 housing crisis. The Financial Crisis Inquiry Commission explicitly called it avoidable.
And the book brings up the internal emails.
Yes. We have emails from Goldman Sachs executives selling securities to their clients that they privately referred to as shitty deals.
He literally knew what they were selling was complete garbage.
They knew, but the structure allowed them to privatize the profits, meaning they kept all their massive bonuses and socialized the losses. When the crash happened, 3.8 million families lost their homes, but the banks got bailed out with TARP funds.
The mechanism worked exactly as it was designed to.
Precisely. And that design absolutely extends to the war machine. We mentioned the USS Maine, but the Gulf of Tonkin in 1964 seems even more blatant.
Because that was the official justification that launched the Vietnam War.
Right. The official story was that North Vietnamese boats attacked U.S. ships. But NSA documents that were finally declassified in 2005 confirmed the second attack never even happened. The administration knew the evidence was shaky at best, but they needed the war, so they ran with it.
But the most chilling document in this entire book, the one that actually made me have to put it down for a second, was Operation Northwoods.
This is the one people have the hardest time believing. But it is a Tier 1, physically signed document from 1962. The Joint Chiefs of Staff, the absolute top military brass in the U.S., signed a proposal to justify an invasion of Cuba.
And what did they propose doing? Because it wasn't just, hey, let's invade.
No, they proposed staging false flag terror attacks in American cities. They proposed sinking boats of Cuban refugees. They even proposed shooting down a commercial airliner. They were going to use a drone painted to look like a civilian plane and blaming it all on Cuba.
Wait, just to be absolutely clear, they were willing to kill their own citizens, or at least terrorize them, just to get a pretext for a war.
Yes. Now, JFK rejected it, and he actually removed the chairman of the Joint Chiefs shortly after. But the structural point remains. The willingness of the security establishment to manufacture a bloody pretext for war is not a theory. It is a documented option in the playbook.
Speaking of JFK, that brings us to the elimination chapter. And this is where things get very sensitive. The book tracks a pattern of what happens when leaders challenge that financial architecture we started with. Perry is very, very careful here. He doesn't say X definitely killed Y. He says, look at the correlation. When a leader tries to bypass a central banking system or claim monetary sovereignty, their life expectancy suddenly drops. Like Abraham Lincoln printing the greenbacks. Right. He printed state money to bypass the exorbitant European high-interest loans during the Civil War. Assassinated. Or JFK signing Executive Order 11-110.
Authorizing silver certificates, again, bypassing the Federal Reserve's monopoly. Assassinated.
And more recently, the book covers Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Now, Gaddafi was a dictator, obviously no doubt about that, but why does the book single him out specifically?
Because of what he was planning financially. Gaddafi was sitting on massive gold reserves. He proposed creating a gold dinar, a Pan-African currency. He wanted to sell Libyan oil for gold, not for US dollars or euros.
Which would have completely challenged the dominance of the petrodollar and the French franc in Africa.
It would have been an existential threat to the global financial order. And Perry points to WikiLeaks, which published emails from Sidney Blumenthal to Hillary Clinton that explicitly mentioned French intelligence was panicked about this gold dinar. Shortly after, NATO intervenes and Gaddafi is dead. The pattern is just hard to ignore.
But today, in the modern era, you don't always need a bullet. You have lawfare.
Character assassination is much cleaner. You use the legal system to bankrupt or imprison your enemies. The book cites the pursuit of Julian Assange. Whether you like him or not, structurally speaking, the legal apparatus was used as a political weapon to destroy a publisher who revealed war crimes.
Or the Durham report regarding the 2016 Trump investigation. The book just lays out how the legal system is weaponized across the board.
Exactly. It sends a message to everyone else to just stay in line.
And if they aren't arresting you, they are watching you. This is what the book calls the digital hidden hand.
Surveillance capitalism. This goes back to Edward Snowden in 2013. We know from programs like PRISM and X-Keyscore that the NSA collects everything. But the book draws on Shoshana Zuboff's work to make a really crucial distinction here. It's not just about predicting behavior anymore, it's about modification.
Modifying behavior. How does that work in practice?
If you know everything about a person, their fears, their debts, their medical history, you can nudge them.
Yeah.
You can curate their feed to make them angry or passive, or to buy a specific product, or to vote a certain way.
And we saw the censorship side of this with the censorship industrial complex. The book details the Twitter files in the Missouri v. Biden case.
Exactly. You have federal agencies actively pressuring social media platforms to suppress speech or silence dissent regarding COVID-19 or elections. It's basically the Operation Mockingbird of the digital age. You don't need to bribe a journalist anymore. You just tweak the algorithm so the dissenting voice disappears into the void.
Okay, this feels heavy. It feels a bit like the walls are closing in.
Yeah.
But Perry does argue we are at a fork in the road. Where do we go from here? Because the book outlines two very different trajectories for the future of money.
This is the critical choice for this generation. Trajectory 1 is CBDCs. Central bank digital currencies.
So is this just the government's version of crypto?
Not exactly. Crypto is generally decentralized. CBDCs are entirely centralized. It is highly programmable money issued directly by the central bank.
Programmable sounds convenient until you really think about it. What does that mean for the average person?
It means money that the issuer controls, even after it's sitting in your wallet. Imagine money that has an expiration date. You have to spend it by Tuesday, or it just disappears from your account to stimulate the economy.
That's terrifying.
Or money you can't spend on gas because you hit your carbon quota for the month. Or, as the book references with the Canadian trucker protests, money that gets frozen instantly because you donated to a cause the government doesn't approve of.
It essentially turns money into a permission slip from the government.
Precisely. It is the ultimate control grid.
So that's the dystopian path. What's the alternative? The book talks about privacy-preserving digital cash.
That's trajectory 2. This uses advanced cryptography, specifically things like zero-knowledge proofs, to maintain the anonymity of physical cash in a digital world.
Oh, zero-knowledge proofs. That sounds like some heavy math. Can you break that down for us simply?
Sure. Imagine you're going into a bar. The bouncer needs to know you're over 21. Right now, you hand him your ID, which shows your full name, your address, your height, your exact birthday. He sees everything.
Right.
A zero-knowledge proof is like a magic box where you put your ID in and the box just flashes a green light to the bouncer that says over 21. The bouncer knows you're legal to enter, but he learns Absolutely nothing else about you.
Oh, that's brilliant. So applied to money, I can prove I have the funds to pay you without you or the bank knowing who I am or what I'm buying.
Exactly. It mimics the anonymity of handing someone a $20 bill at a farmer's market, but digitally. It allows for digital sovereignty and breaks that surveillance link.
So for the listener who has been with us for this entire deep dive, how do we actually break the spell? What does structural literacy look like in practice on a random Tuesday morning?
First and foremost, media literacy. But real media literacy. When you read a headline, check the ownership, check the funding. Ask yourself, is this a tier 1 document or is this just an opinion piece telling me how to feel?
And we have to stop looking for villains.
Yes, stop looking for a bad guy to blame, stop engaging in the endless red team versus blue team drama, look for the incentives. If war is profitable, the system will produce war. If outrage drives clicks, the algorithm will produce outrage. It's just logic, it's not magic.
And take action where you can. Support local, independent journalism, the people actually doing the digging. Protect your financial privacy.
Yep.
Demand accountability through things like FOIA requests and antitrust laws.
The system completely relies on us being passive consumers of reality. It relies on us not seeing the bars of the cage. Structural literacy turns us into active observers.
And I think there is a genuinely hopeful note to end on here. The hidden hand isn't magic. It's just people. It's institutional arrangements made by people.
And people can change those arrangements. The Church Committee happened. The Freedom of Information Act exists. Snowden got the documents out. These systems are powerful, but they crack. They are not immune to sunlight.
I want to leave you with the thought from the very end of the book that really stuck with me. Perry suggests that the most effective prison is the one you don't even know you're in. For the last 20 minutes, we've been tracing the bars of that prison, the language, the debt, the algorithms.
And the quote that sums it up perfectly is, "You cannot resist what you cannot see. Now you can see it."
Now that you see it, what will you do with that visibility? Thanks for diving deep with us. We'll see you next time.